Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie Boone, and I am the Marketing Manager for the NSF-ISR division here at NSF International. I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, giving an introduction to the newly released ISO 45001-2018. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker for today. Joy Keniston-Longrie is our Environmental Health and Safety Business Unit Manager at NSF. Joy is a graduate of the University of Washington in Seattle, where she graduated from the School of Public Health and Safety with a Master's in Public Health, a BS in Environmental Health and Safety, and a BA in Spanish. She is a licensed professional environmental engineer, registered sanitarian, certified Arctic cold regions, and is bilingual in English and Spanish. Specialized expertise in the areas of environmental health and safety, including utilities, transportation, air quality, asset management, greenhouse gas and carbon footprints, as well as environmental program policies, protection, and compliance. Joyce is also one of the first auditors globally to receive her lead auditor credentials for ISO 45000 occupational health and safety. Just have a few housekeeping items before we get started today. During the webinar, will the attendee be placed on mute to prevent from any distractions. If you have any questions at all during the event, please use the chat function and I will get to those questions as possible. And we will do a Q&A at the end of the session. This webinar is being recorded. All registrants will receive an email with a link to download the webinar as well as a PDF of the slides. Again, thank you for joining us today and supporting NSF. It's greatly appreciated, and I want you to go ahead and take it away, Joy. Must be having some audio, Joy.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Go ahead. You're all set.
Great. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, everybody, for taking time from your busy schedule to share an hour with us to go over an exciting new international standard, the Occupational Health and Safety Management Standard. So today we'll be walking through let's see here. Hold on, Katie. Okay. There's just a little delay here. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to go over an introduction of the standard. Again, hooray, it's published. It was published on March 12th, just last month. We'll go over briefly the benefits, the differences between OHSAS 18001 and ISO 45001, Occupational Health and Safety. I'll be highlighting what the differences are and the emphasis in the new international standard. I'll talk to you about the timing for migration or transition to the new standard and what you can do to plan, and then answer any questions you might have. There's a slight delay in getting the, there we go. So as all of you may be aware that we've had a number of webinars associated with the Occupational Health and Safety Management System 45001, and it's been a long journey, but it's well worth it. I'm real excited about the new standard, and so we finally are here at the international published standard. And so while that's the end of the review cycle of changing from the OHSAS standard to the international standard for occupational health and safety, it actually is just the beginning of our journey to becoming certified, helping all of you become certified to the new standard. Many of you may have already been experienced the transition because you may be registered to either the Quality Management System 9001 or the Environmental Management System 14001. And those standards are currently going through an upgrade or a transition to a newly published standard that was published in 2015. And that is ending in September this year, September 14th, 2018. But just when you think they're getting exciting, we're going to also start and kick off the new migration to the Occupational Health and Safety. And there will be a 3-year migration period, which started at the day of the first official date of publication, which was March 12th, 2018. And everybody who's currently registered to OHSAS 18001 will have a 3-year time period, and all certificates to 18001 will be expiring on March 11th, 2021. There's a polling question here. I would like to get a feel as far as for the participants here, if you could check all of these standards that you are currently registered to. I would appreciate that, so I have a feel as far as how many of you might just be not registered at all, or perhaps registered to more than one. Okay, so I see that quite a few of you obviously are registered to the OHSAS 18001, and a number other of you are registered to others, so that's great. And then some that aren't currently registered. So this is a great opportunity to be able to take a look at and see where we're going to be going and what's on the horizon with this new standard. Again, I apologize for the delay in the slides. So I wanted to again remind everybody why occupational health and safety is important. It's important to obviously the employees, it's important to employers, it's important to the family of the workers, and it's important to the community. And it's really unfortunate that every year over 370 million injuries or incidents take place on the job, with over 278 million people dying. That's a lot. And that is equivalent to about 15, a worker dies from or is injured every 15 seconds, which is really a sad statistic. But thankfully, there's people like you and organizations like you that want to make a difference. And I'm confident that the new international standard, Occupational Health and Safety Standard, will help you and your organization protect the health and safety of your employees. There are a number of benefits associated with 45001 Occupational Health and Safety, and primarily it will help your organization identify those occupational health and safety risks as well as opportunities, so that you can enhance the quality of the work environment for the workers who are actually in your workplace, or those that are along the supply chain via the contractor, subcontractor, and procurement processes. You will also have an opportunity to become further engaged with both internal and external interested parties, and continue to have an enhanced role for leadership, employee involvement, and improving your corporate culture. And studies have shown that organizations that do participate and have a strong culture of occupational health and safety also save money, both near-term and long-term, in a variety of matters. Whether it be with injury, labor and industry claims, or insurance rates. Wow, this is so slow today. I really apologize. So there are, if you look at the occupational health and safety on the right-hand side, there's the circles, and that again shows some of the benefits. There's both tangible and intangible benefits. We talked a little bit about some of the economic savings as far as reduced rates associated with your insurance, and reduced lost days or injury costs associated with protecting your employees. You also have the benefit of protecting your brand and reputation, because there are consumer expectations that organizations, whether it's through the supply chain or the final retail product or service or activity that you're providing, they want to be sure that it's coming from an organization that looks out and provides for occupation and the health and safety of their workers and the products that go along with it. Also, if your organization is involved in sustainability, there's 3 pillars of sustainability: economic, environmental, and social. And this Occupational Health and Safety International Standard does clearly support the pillar for social sustainability, the social pillar for sustainability. This is a quick overview comparing how the OHSAS 18001 is organized. That you can see that on the left-hand side, and you can see the new clauses in the ISO 45001 on the right-hand side. For those of you who are familiar with the new either quality management or environmental management systems, the 2015 versions, the ISO 45001 does follow the same 10 clauses, so you'll be very familiar with those clauses now. For those of you who are not familiar with that, what this new standard does is it takes everything that was in section or clause 4 of OHSAS 18001 and it splits it up among 10 different clauses in a little bit more detail. And so I will actually show you that as we go through clause by clause at a high level. I wanted to point out some of the things that have changed and some of the things that have not changed. So first of all, in the ISO 45001, it's no longer mandatory to have a management representative or a manual or to actually use the term preventative actions. That doesn't mean that you can't do it, but it's not mandatory. And then if you also look at the two little boxes on the right-hand side, it talks about the difference between ISO 45001, which is more of a process-based, whereas 18001 was more procedural-based. The new standard is a lot more dynamic and it has a lot more focus on risks and opportunities and engaging interested parties, be it internal or external, and looking at the context of your organization. And those, the risk, the interested parties, and context of the organization was not part of the old 18001. Now, if you're familiar with either the 9000 or 14000 quality management or environmental management, it's very similar, but there are some new specific nuances for occupational health and safety, which I will get into when we get into those areas. As far as what has stayed the same, there's a lot of the categories that have this very similar wording and similar titles. However, there are shades of gray or shades of blue here as far as there is a lot more emphasis in different areas in the new standard compared to the old 18001 standard. And again, the last time 18001 was updated was in 2007, so that's been 11 years ago. And so there's been a lot of new information on best management practice that have come to light in the profession. So we're able to incorporate that as well. As you migrate to the new international standard, again, some of the primary differences you just might want to be aware of, again, it is going to the new ISO structure. So the good thing about that is if you are looking at having it integrated with, say, quality management or environmental management, it will be really easy, and it should be really easy if you have an integrated policy from corporate or in your particular organization. So you can get some credit that way if you want it to integrate. There's a lot more emphasis on leadership and commitment. On 45001, this occupational health and safety, not only does it have the emphasis on leadership and commitment, but it has a lot of emphasis associated with the participation and consultation of workers and where they exist workers' representatives, which is different than the other international standards. On the context of the organization, again, they are looking at internal and external issues that could impact your organization, and specifically they call out how the internal and external issues of workers and other interested parties might be part of that. And so again, there's a lot of emphasis on the participation of workers and their representatives where they exist. The risks and opportunities has a lot of emphasis associated on the occupational health and safety risks and opportunities associated with processes, change management, and legal and other requirements associated with from an occupational health and safety standard. And there is a lot of emphasis on all of those terms here. Additionally, there's a lot of emphasis with procurement, and that's not only procurement of goods and services, but also in how you contract and how you outsource. And again, the emphasis is to ensure that you're not introducing anything into your workplace via purchasing of products or services or contractors or products that you're outsourcing that could have an unintentional negative impact or hazard associated with occupational health and safety risks. Communication is a big emphasis. Whoa, that changed on its own. Do you know what happened there? Okay. Okay, and so there's a lot of emphasis on communications, both internal and external. and including workers and who might be interested in that, and that's contractors, visitors, people who come to your workplace, or neighbors if they're in the vicinity. And then ensuring that the communication is appropriate and that it's two-way, and ensure that it's appropriate to whether it's, if there's a language, the actual language it's in, and the literacy of employees, etc. And then documented information is not just a manual or paper. It can be a variety of forms. It could be a video, electronic, etc. And there's a lot of emphasis on performance evaluation as far as what's going to be evaluated when, how it's going to be measured and calibrated, and how does that benchmark. A lot of people will have questions about the migrate. In the old standards, they're calling it transition, but because this is a new ISO standard, the Organization for International Standards out of Geneva has called this transition from 18,001 to 45,001 a migration, because at the end of this 3-year period, OHSAS, Occupational Health and Safety 18,001, that international standard will be sunsetted. It will be withdrawn. So NSF-ISR, we're in the process of obtaining our approval from ANAB. We expect to get our approval as an accredited body in second quarter, probably most likely in May. We're highly confident that we'll go smoothly because we have a lot of experience in this, and we are real excited to provide these services to each of you and your organizations. I just wanted to remind each of you that as we're going through this 3-year migration period, it is your organization's responsibility. If you're currently certified to 18,001, you need to maintain that certification through this period. Also, we will have a number of services available for you on our webpage. Some of them are there now, and some will be transitioning out over the next couple of months, and they will help you be organized and prepared so you have a very smooth and simple migration period. When you're ready to, when you're prepared to migrate or have your transition audit or migration audit, there's 3 different choices that you have. You could do it at your routine surveillance, you could do it at the recertification time period, or you could have a special audit. The guidance that we have gotten from ANAB and from the other regular oversight bodies indicate that for audit days, there'll be a minimum of 1 additional audit day to cover both existing and new requirements. Now, it may be adjusted, but it says only upwards, not downwards, depending on the complexity or other issues associated with uniquely to your organization. And then, in order to have a migration audit, we'll get into that. You do need to have, you need to be ensured that you're informed, you're aware, you've organized yourself around the new standard, that you've done your internal audit to the new standard, and you've had a management review to the new standard. And then once the migration audit or upgrade audit has been completed, you need to remember that you have to have all of your any minor nonconformances need to be reviewed and accepted, and if all majors would have to be reviewed, accepted, and verified. So just those are things to bear in mind as you plan towards your next, planning towards your migration to the new standard. As I mentioned before, the migration began on March 12, 2018, and then all certificates for 18,001 will expire on March 11, 2021. And if you have not, if your organization has not migrated by that point in time, then you'll be restarting over at stage 1 and stage 2 from the beginning. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give a quick overview of the standard itself, and I will go over at a fairly quick pace some of the information that's in there. I've already talked about the high-level structure, so I won't repeat that. In the introduction of the standard, again, I urge you to get copies of the standard. You can get it from our webpage, or you can go to the ISO website and also get a copy of it. And be sure you get the 45,001 2018, the published version. You don't want any of the draft stuff. And I wanted to also say that it's really important to take a look at not only the body of the standard, the 10 clauses, but look at the introduction and also look at the annex, because the annex gives a lot of really good information about the interpretation as far as what the folks in Geneva and the people, all the international countries that were involved in the development of this, what their thought process was, and it gives a lot of clarification. And the introduction is particularly important because it kind of frames the context of the importance of this whole standard and the success factors. In fact, it talks about, again, that it is an organization's responsibility to ensure that the occupational health and safety of the workers are protected and promoted as part of their ongoing daily work process. And that the purpose of the Occupational Health and Safety Management System is to provide a framework for your organization to identify what those risks might be associated with occupational health and safety, and then what actions your organization may take to reduce the risk associated with that and the exposure of that. The standard talks about what some of the success factors are and some of the key success factors associated with all international standards, but in particular with occupational health and safety management systems, is you do need to have commitment from top management. Because top management does set the stage for establishing the culture and expectation and leading your organization to ensure you do have a safe and healthy work culture so that the people who come to work healthy go home healthy. And so there are specific roles called out, and a key factor is that top management does take a leading role in promoting that culture, and that they communicate it, and that they do have ongoing consultation and participation of workers in the occupational health and safety program, and that there's appropriate resources associated with it so that an organization can identify the hazards and control those risks and look at those opportunities to take advantage of that. The first clause is called scope, but the scope is not the scope of the organization. It's actually the scope of the international standard. And again, the scope is looking at the prevention of work-related injuries and ill health, and to help an organization proactively manage those opportunities and risks associated with occupational health and safety. The third clause looks at terms and definitions, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of different groupings here. There are common terms that if you've been involved in any of the other standards, they're common to whether it's 9,000, 14,000, or 18,000. So interested party is a common term. Top management is a common term. Documented information as examples. In 45,001, ISO 45,001, there are some terms that are specific to this standard only. Worker is defined, participation, consultation, and it's important that you be aware of that. And surprisingly enough, worker wasn't actually defined in 18,001, but they do have a definition for it here that I'll go over. And then I also wanted to point out there were some terms that were dropped from 18,001, so we've highlighted those for you there as well. As I talked about, the term worker is actually defined, and I wanted to because it's so important to the whole concept of occupational health and safety is you're trying to prevent and promote work-related health and prevent injuries in the work environment. So here they talk about a worker is a person performing work or work-related activities that are under the control of the organization. And in the definition itself, it has a couple of notes that I've included here. But again, these workers, they can be temporary workers, they can be volunteers. So it doesn't, and they can be paid or unpaid. So that is a little bit broader term than you might be used to. And that workers can be both management as well as non-management people. And that it can extend, depending on the extent of the control of your organization, it can extend into contractors and subcontractors who are doing work on or for the control of your organization. So be aware of that as we go through this, and you may want to take a look at it when you get your copy of the standard. On Clause 4, that talks about the context of the organization. Again, in 18,001, that was not there, and so that's part of it, one of the changes. And when they talk about the context of the organization, if you look over here on the right-hand side, no, excuse me, that's the left-hand side, there's the context of the organization include internal and external issues, and it's defined in the in the standard itself, and there's a really good explanation of this in the annex. We will be launching a tool to help you think about, it's an optional tool if you're interested, that helps you kind of think through those issues yourself as you go through and do the analysis of your organization. Again, the context is trying to get a high-level understanding of issues that are both positive and negative that could affect your organization. And then depending on what you've identified, some of those may become requirements or obligations if your organization chooses that they're relevant for your organization to manage for risks or opportunities. And then 4.2 talks about the understanding the needs and expectations of workers and other interested parties. If you're familiar with 14,000 or 9,000, it doesn't have the word workers in it. And so this clause specifically calls out the needs and expectations of workers, but also other interested parties. And so it implies, and actually is stated in the annex, that there is two-way communication that goes along with it, and that you need to understand what their needs and expectations are, and which of those might become requirements or obligations to your organization. Some may be because they're required by law, but some may be if there's say a union contract, or it may be just some kind of expectations or policy that your organization puts together. When you look at potential interested parties, internal or external, it could be suppliers, it could be contractors, it could be neighbors, and there's quite an extensive list in the back of the standard in the annex, and it's very helpful, and we have included that in the optional tool, so that should help you as well. Clause 5 looks at leadership and, again, worker participation. And so, again, this talks about the expectations of your top management and your leadership to model good behavior, lay out those expectations, and have ongoing participation and consultation with the workers in the organization. Again, this is where some of that stuff may have been in 18,001, but this is how it's organized in 45,001. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but again, there is a lot of emphasis in the new standard on leadership and commitment. And while top management can delegate some of the responsibilities, they do retain the accountability for occupational health and safety. So it's important, if you have not briefed your management and your top management, it's important that you do. And it will also be the expectation that your top management will participate in the opening and closing meeting, as well as in the actual audit itself. And so this talks about some of the things as far as what your organization will need to ensure that and you can help your leadership if you don't already do this. Some of the things as far as being sure people are communicating the importance of occupational health and safety. You have documented evidence of how it's being communicated, whether it's in videos, whether it's in ongoing newsletters, and the daily or weekly safety meetings. Every organization is a little bit different, but there's a lot of opportunities that your top management can become involved and engaged, and so this will be a great opportunity for them to do that. Clause 6 looks at the planning. Again, there was planning involved in 18,001. There's a lot more emphasis, again, of identifying both risks and opportunities associated with occupational health and safety. And I wanted to put the emphasis on determining if there's legal or other requirements associated with occupational health and safety. And so, again, your organization has the focus is to identify those risks and opportunities and figure out how you're going to manage those, and then how you're going to measure to see if you're successful or not through continual ongoing improvement. Hazard identification is not all that different than before. It can be the hierarchy of controls, or again, the hazard identification through different situations, whether it's regular ongoing work, whether it's change management, emergency situations, etc. Again, the assessment of those risks and opportunities and identifying those, there's different methods that can be used, and and again, it needs to consider both day-to-day as well as changing needs associated with your occupational health and safety risks. Clause 7 looks at the support to be sure that there's enough resources. Again, this does get back to be sure your top management is providing those resources that you need for ensuring that you have competent workers. You will need to define, what competency means in particular for your internal audit, to be sure that your internal auditors are trained with a new standard, and for those people who have key roles associated with it, and that basically that people are aware as far as how their jobs might be impacted by either injury, hazards or risks, or occupational exposure, and so that they know what it is and what the consequences are and how they can protect themselves. And so that goes quite a bit into this in the resources, as far as both ensuring that it's there, people are aware of it, and it's communicated and documented as you go through this. As I mentioned on the resources, they also define back in the annex that resources are not just money. It can be money, but it also is to be sure you have the right human resources there, the right infrastructure, the appropriate equipment, even information technology and communications, to ensure that you protect your workers and the workplace from occupational health and safety hazards. Clause 8 looks at operational controls. It contains the emergency preparedness and response, just as the old 18,001 has, but it also talks quite a bit about eliminating hazards and reducing occupational health and safety. Here's where that hierarchy of controls come in, identifying to be sure you have processes in place to help manage change. And this is where the outsourcing and procurement and contractors there's emphasis here, where your organization does need to define what controls and processes you have in place to be sure that there's not going to be something introduced into your workplace that could cause harm to either the permanent workers or vice versa. The contractors might be impacting your workers, or your employees might be impacting the contractors, or new equipment coming in, etc. That hierarchy of controls, you're probably very familiar with this because you are here and have been recorded, or many of you have been certified already to occupational health and safety. But again, it's the elimination, avoid it to begin with, substitute if you have safer chemicals with, and eliminate more hazardous chemicals, but be sure you're doing that so you don't have other unintended impacts. Engineering controls, administrative controls, and last resort would be the personal protective equipment. And at future webinars, we'll get into some examples of this as well. Management of change is real important, whether that's management of change for new products, new processes or services, or even bringing in new materials to be sure that you're not introducing something that could have an occupational health or safety risk to the employees, whether it be a mechanical risk, a guarding risk, a noise risk, a chemical risk. So there's all kinds of things that you can, flammability risk. There's lots of different ways that you can introduce things with, and so you need to be sure that it's thought through ahead of time, and that you have processes in place to be sure that you are doing what you say you're going to do to protect employee health and safety. On the procurement, again, they talk quite a bit about ensuring that your organization has a process in place to ensure that you're procuring products that are as safe and healthy as possible, and that you follow those, whether it, again, be the raw materials or equipment or products or hazardous materials or substances. And then also, if you're ordering equipment, you need to be sure that it's specified to protect occupational health and safety, that when it comes, it meets those specifications. When it's installed, it functions as it's supposed to be, and that if there's any kind of special training, that the employees are aware of that and been trained. All of that has been worked out before it's been put in operation. So those are the kinds of things that they're looking at for in procurement. Again, on contractors, in particular, it's important for contractors who are working on site that you have identified those types of things, that you have expectations laid out for occupational health and safety requirements associated with contractors, and that it's documented, and that you are ensuring that they're following that as well. Because as you know, contractors can have adverse impacts on your workers in the health place and vice versa. So that's what this is all about. I will be having a future webinar about creative tools that others have used to put in place, but again, clearly having specifications or pre-qualifications of your contractors to ensure that you're doing some pre-screening and then during the award, and then also actually when they're performing the service. So there's a lot of things you can do associated with that. Clause 9 talks about performance evaluation. There was performance evaluation in 18001. It shows you where the clauses were in Section 4, but again, in a new international standard, it is in Section 9, and it talks again that the performance evaluation needs to be risk-based. It talks about you need to be sure what methods you're going to be using, when you're going to be doing the monitoring, how, who, etc., how you're going to do the analysis, what criteria are you going to be benchmarking yourself against to show whether you're have been successful or improving or not, and then communicating that to the interested parties, be they internal or external interested parties. Again, the performance evaluation gets into more detail. Again, on the right-hand side here, this is talks about what's, again, in the standard, and again, there is emphasis on the legal and other requirements. And other requirements, again, could be things that your organization is committing to. And then it talks about who, what, when, where, how, why it's going to be organized and monitored. And then the annex, again, gives some really good excellent examples on how you might approach it. So, again, take a look at it. It's very interesting reading. Really, I think it is. Clause 9, again, continues on the performance evaluation and the evaluation of compliance with legal and other requirements. And so there will be a requirement, a part of your standard. Internal audit should be looking at this, and this will be an emphasis for the transition or migration audit as well. Clause 10, the last clause, talks about the improvement, and this is where continual improvement comes in. We have been told by our oversight body, because we also do get audited, is that an emphasis on all of these standards will be to show that there is ongoing continual improvement, that the organizations are showing that, and so there will be emphasis on that. The annex again talks about some examples as far as what you might be able to show as examples of ongoing continual improvement for the opportunities, whether it be new technologies, suggestions that you've gotten from interested parties, whether they be employees or other interested parties, how you've incorporated new knowledge and understanding of health and safety related issues. As you know, there's often new information that comes out on chemicals or new things with respect to hazards, what you've done to improve that, to avoid and follow your hierarchy of control to protect your employees' capabilities, and etc. So, again, just to summarize, we will be migrating. With the migration process has officially begun. ISO 45001:2018, Occupational Health and Safety, will be replacing OHSAS 18001:2007. 18001 will be considered withdrawn at the end of the 3-year migration period, and that date will be March 11th, 2021. And that if you're currently certified to Occupational Health and Safety 18001, you need to maintain that certification until you have migrated successfully to the new 45001 standard. I urge you to get a copy of the standard as soon as possible, and be sure, because it is copyrighted, that you get enough so that the people who need to have a copy of it in your organization have it. So you'll probably need to get more than one copy associated with that. You can get it from our web page, from us, or from ISO itself. We encourage you to do a gap analysis. You can do it on your own, or you can contact us and we can do a gap analysis for you. Again, develop what your implementation plan is based on where your gaps are, and be sure that you have defined what your competency is and training requirements are associated with 45001. And to be sure that you've involved your interested parties and met the intent of the standard. And then when you are ready for doing your internal, you have everything in place, everybody trained, you've done your internal audit, and you've done your management review, you'll be ready for your migration. And we will continue to talk to you about that as we go forward. Again, here's the key dates. Again, it was published March 12, 2018. we expect to have our certification from ANAB very soon. And so if you're ready, we will put you on the list. So as soon as we get our approval, we can get you scheduled. We are requiring that the migration audits be completed by January 11th, 2021. That will give you time to, in case there's any outstanding like major noncompliances or minor noncompliances, you can have those all resolved before your certification expires on March 11th, 2021 if you're in 18001. If you miss that date, which we're sure we will help you, support you so that you don't, you will need to start over with stage 1 and stage 2. But our goal will be that that doesn't happen to anybody. So we have had several webinars to date giving you an update as we've gone through the different drafts of the international standard. Today we talked about the published standard and what has changed, and we will be having future webinars to help you understand some of the option tools we have that will help you through the migration, and any tips we can provide you for smooth migration and for scheduling and answering questions. So we do have a poll question here, and if you could take the time to answer this poll, that would be great. Great. So it looks like most of you are planning on migrating to the 45001. Some of you will be integrating with 9014 and possibly with some other standards. So that's great. And so again, we will be having some focus, quite a bit of focus on in a future webinar on integration too, because we know that's going to be one of the key benefits, in particular with the new layout of the standard with the 10 clauses. We will continually be updating our web page, and we will send you notifications if you're our clients about any new information as we post it on our web page. But if you go to NSF-ISR, that's the quickest way to get there, and then click on Environmental Health and Safety, and then we will have 45001 new information. And again, we'll be updated on a pretty regular basis over the next couple of months. And we already have some good information there now, but this is so you know. So what we covered today, we talked about the benefits of occupational health and safety, ISO 45001, some of the differences between the 18000 and the 45001, highlighted some of the emphasis and challenges and changes, and then also the timing to get to the new standard and what you can do to plan to get there. So at this point in time, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Katie, you're my question keeper.
Yes, I haven't seen any come through. If you guys have any questions, please use the chat function because everybody on the call is muted. Also, I'll put Joy's contact information up on the screen here in case you wanted to contact her directly with questions. If there was questions you didn't want to ask in the forum, you can contact Joy directly and ask her any questions that you have about the standard.
We are updating our frequently asked questions, so we'll have that up there as well. And again, we feel that we're really well prepared to help our clients and our auditors and everybody with a transparent, smooth transition because we've been 3 years in transition with other standards. So we've gotten all the kinks worked out, and so you were able to take all those lessons learned and have an even more fabulous product to help you be successful.
I haven't seen any questions come in, Joy, so I think we might be all set and people might be following up with you directly with any questions they have about the upgraded standard or really just figuring out what questions they have at this point with it being such a newly released standard. So I will, again, follow up with everybody that was registered for the event with a copy of the slides as well as a recording of the event, so you can expect that within about the next week, and it will be located on our website as well. So you can, like I said, you can expect to hear from our team with information about downloading everything that you heard today. So thank you very much for your time again, and thank you, Joy, for the presentation. And we'll be following up with the team and keep an eye out for future webinars.
Thank you, and thank everybody for taking time and for your dedication to protecting public health and safety. It really is important, and it makes a difference today and for future generations, for millions of people. Best of luck on your journey. Give me a call if you have any questions. Thanks.